anybody can quite appreciate our friend from Kenya's story as I can. So the plane that I'm on is in the final descent to the Kinshasa International Airport. Kinshasa, the capital of the Republic of Congo in the heart of Africa. Only when I looked outside, it seemed very, very strange. We were descending into a massive city, but when I looked out the window, all I could see was darkness. Now, where were the lights of a massive city, the ones we had come to see as we were traveling across several countries? But here I could see nothing but blackness. I was almost getting concerned until the plane banked a little and I saw 2 rows of purple lights, which I knew marked a runway. And sure enough, in a few moments, we were on the ground. Now, it was the summer of 1966. Yeah, all of you 90s stories, yes. So, I was with a group of 3 other people. The 4 of us were coming to Congo, to Kinshasa, to teach at the American School of Kinshasa, an English-speaking international school, and we were on a 2-year assignment. Now, the other members of my party were John Franz, a young man my own age, who was to be my roommate for 2 years, and a lifelong dear, dear friend, and a young married couple. Now, I guess we would say, we're probably as naive and innocent and inexperienced as any 4 people could be. All of us had grown up in the small cities of the West Coast. I would say we had been cocooned in a life that was not all that different from the life in the world of Leave It to Beaver, that 1950s iconic show. We, of course, had never been on international travel. And the funny thing is, when I think back, I don't think we knew very much at all about the country that we were arriving at. Congo had been an independent country for only 6 years. For over a century, had been a colony of Belgium, and after exploiting all the vast riches of Congo for that century, they very quickly, actually, in 1960, granted the country independence with almost no preparation. There was 1 African doctor in the entire nation of multiple millions of people. Well, as soon as independence occurred, the country descended into chaos and civil war. And even after the Civil War had somewhat settled down in 1964, those of you old enough to remember, there was a very famous Simba rebellion in the eastern part of the country that resulted in the death of, for example, the white missionary, Dr. Paul Carlson. Well, order had only been restored when one of the Congolese generals, Seko Seso Mobutu, did a coup and took over complete control of the country. So now, he also became a very close ally of the United States. So once again, Americans were welcomed in Congo. Now, we were arriving at 2 o'clock in the morning, but this was not our original arrival time. We were all young people in our early 20s, and in New York, we thought, why take a direct flight to Congo when we could, maybe go to Europe and see Europe? And so we somehow, and it's a rather miraculous story, but we got our itinerary changed and we spent 2 days in Rome, a really wonderful time, and then took this direct flight to Congo. Now, of course, we were not totally stupid. We sent a telegram to our host letting them know of our new arrival time. Everything, of course, was set. So, 2 o'clock in the morning, we stepped out of the air-conditioned cabin into a warm tropical night, followed the passengers down the stairs, picked up our luggage, and headed toward the terminal, which from a distance looked like a really modern, slick terminal. And looks can be deceiving. Because as we got closer, we saw that everything was dingy and unkept, and there was actually a very strong smell of urine everywhere. Well, we just followed the rest of the passengers, and there was a place that was clearly marked customs. So obviously that's what you do when you arrive at a new country. So we got in line and went through customs. We expected no troubles at all. I mean, why should we? We had gone through this several times before. And the only unusual thing we had, beside our couple of suitcases each, was my friend John had a portable tape recorder. It was a small 1960s technological wonder. And we were intended, both of us, to send tapes back and forth to our parents in the States. And John had carefully kept that tape recorder with him all the way across the United States. So, I'm basically closing up my suitcase after kind of sailing through customs as we expected, when suddenly behind me, I hear shouting. I turn around, and here is John holding on to his tape recorder with the customs agent pulling it also. Well, John is very alarmed and confused and doesn't know what's going on. And so the person keeps speaking, yelling at us in French, and of course, being brilliant international travelers, none of us spoke French, and we didn't know what the hell was going on. And so John pulled, the guy pulled back, and things were really getting tense. And then suddenly, out from an area of the airport, came a man in a blue Alitalia uniform, an Alitalia agent. Wow, he came up to us. He said, what seems to be the problem? We explained about the tape recorder. So he had a conversation with the person who was in charge of customs there, and then the customs agent very elaborately made a big check on the tape recorder, which means it was okay to go through. So we asked the Alitalia agent, what in the world happened? Well, we were really ignorant travelers, and of course we didn't know about matabiche, which is basically you need to bribe people to get things done. And so he just informed us that he had given the customs man a very nice ballpoint pen, and they were now best friends. Well, then he asked us, okay, now who's here to meet you? Well, by that time, all of the passengers on the plane had gone on to the night and disappeared. And we looked at what was left. There was no one. There was absolutely no one left in the terminal except us. And so we told him, well, it doesn't look like anyone's here to meet us. And I wish I could remember the look he gave us at that time. But he did say to us, when you arrive in Congo for the first time, you do not arrive without people to meet you. We said, well, we sent a telegram. Well, he also informed us that telegrams in the rest of the world wasn't like it, and things were in the United States. So we said, well, what do we do now? Here we are, stuck in the middle of the night in this strange country. So he said, well, there's a bus over there at the curb. I think it's best for you to take the bus into the downtown Kinshasa. There's a major hotel there, and try to get a room for the night. So, okay, that was our direction. So we gathered our luggage, climbed onto this bus, and headed out into the dark night toward the city of Kinshasa. Now, as we were traveling, it just seemed like we were in some kind of an alien landscape, because we would drive through the darkness, and then there would be a group of buildings all lit eerily by very bright fluorescent lights. And then there would be a long period of darkness and another compound of buildings with these fluorescent lights everywhere. It was really very disconcerting. Well, we finally got to the city itself. And Kinshasa, again, appeared like this modern European city. But as we arrived toward the center of the city, we found that almost on every street corner, there were trash barrels, old 50-gallon oil barrels with fires in them. And around these fires were a group of men. Now, we couldn't imagine, what in the world are these people doing here? Well, anyway, we finally got to the hotel. We finally found that. We got out of the bus, piled our luggage in front of the hotel, left for some reason I can't possibly conceive, We left our lone female member, Lois, to take care of the luggage, and us men went inside to see if we could book a room. Well, once again, okay, you don't speak the language. And so through gestures and the words we know, we tried to communicate to the clerks that we wanted a room for the night. And they were able to say very clearly to us that there was no room available. We could not get a room for the night. Well, now what? Well, then about that time, Lois started yelling, "Gary," from outside. It seems that the men who had been at the various fires were starting to drift toward her, and she was afraid. And so we rushed out there, gathered up our luggage, brought it all, plopped it in the middle of the lobby, and tried to think, once again, now what? And it was then, like the climax of a movie, that an angel strode through the front doors of that hotel, and it was our Alitalia agent. He came up to us with that rueful smile and said, "I thought you might be in trouble." Well, I don't think I've ever been so relieved in my life. And so he, of course, went to the clerks and talked to them, but he came back to us and said, "No, they insist. They have no room and you cannot stay here for the night." So, what is this, the third time? We're thinking, now what? What are we going to do? And then the agent says to us, "I think you shall have to come and stay in my apartment for the night." And so, all of our luggage, we somehow crammed into it, what was it, a little Fiat, and went to this really lovely flat that he kept in the city. And that night, our first night in Africa, I slept on one couch, John slept in the other, and the couple had the guest room. And that was our introduction to the world that we were going to be part of. The next morning, he fed us a very nice breakfast, made our contacts, and sent us on our way. So this man, this stranger we never saw again, was an amazing person, an introduction to our time in Congo. Now, what did I learn from all this? I'm a teacher, I have to make a conclusion, right? Well, I learned a number of things. In fact, it was 2 years of incredible learning. One of them I learned is, if you are a guest of a culture, learn it. So the first thing that John and I did was we started taking French lessons because that was necessary, but probably more importantly, we started and really endeavored to learn Lingala, the indigenous language of that area of the Congo. And through that, we also learned that all these strange men who were gathered around the various fires were night watchmen. And quite frankly, it was very comforting for us that outside our home, every night, were two men sitting around a fire looking after us. And they were also some of the Congolese that we got to know best. Well, there was another thing that came out of that week that was mentioned. It was serendipity. The interesting thing about this introduction to Congo was that the word serendipity entered into my vocabulary. Serendipity is unlooked for good fortune. And it seemed like those 2 years were just full of that kind of thing. When our car was stolen, and they were seldom seen again, it came back. We got visas to countries that we weren't supposed to go to. We hitchhiked in those countries, were picked up by strangers who took us 300 miles out of their way to our destination. When we were trying to buy a car, at the end of the time, it came late, and so the car dealer invited us to spend a week on his houseboat. And more significantly, and this is a whole other story, we managed to escape unscathed from what is really a major race riot. Now, I can't finish the story without saying that there was another part of the story. And that was that I was on a rather intense spiritual journey in those 2 years. I had grown up in a Christian home, and I think part of the reason going to Congo was to find out that this God that I believed in really existed in somewhere like Africa. So, John and I, who was on the same journey, we just prayed about everything. And think of it what you will, things happened. So, I guess what I concluded, 3 things. learn things. Serendipity exists. Look for good things in God. And I guess those have been the three things that guided the rest of my life.